Of course, it has learnt its lessons from Operation Sindoor, but no nation which gets involved in this kind of an activity wants to admit failure. Admitting failure is a political harakiri virtually against its own population, for its own population. The geopolitical progression of events has definitely emboldened Pakistan, Pakistan's leadership, its quasi leadership, and its main leadership. What we are therefore seeing at the moment are experiments happening. These are things which Pakistan is experimenting with to see the limits of India's tolerance, till where can it go.
Joining me on Global Pulse now is Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, former GOC 15 Corps and Chancellor at the Central University of Kashmir. Sir, great to have you with us on the show. Let me begin by asking you, Pakistani politician Chaudhry Anwarul Haq tells the Pakistan occupied Kashmir Assembly, from the Red Fort to the forest of Kashmir, we will continue to hit you. By the grace of Allah, we've done it, and they're still unable to count the bodies. Now, we've known for decades that Pakistan has been exporting terror to India, and every major terror attack in this country bears the unmistakable imprint of Pakistan. But now, does it look like Pakistani politicians are beginning to wear this as a badge of honor?
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me for your program, and a good Jai Hind to all our viewers. Well, we got to remember that Pakistan has been at this game for the better part of the last 37 years, 36, 37 years. And in most majority of this period, they have always been in denial about what has happened in our territory in terms of terror. You've mostly seen that even in the case of the Pahalgam attack, it was a claim by a terrorist group. It was not a claim by any politician. This is a transformation of confidence, a transformation of the geopolitical environment, a transformation in Pakistan's strategic outlook that we are viewing at this time. Because this is the first time we are hearing this. Of course, you can dismiss it completely as something completely nonchalant, because this gentleman may just be claiming it for some popularity, local political popularity. But the fact that 48 hours after he has said it, no one has taken the trouble to counter it, obviously means it's got the backing of the establishment in Pakistan. And that confirms exactly what I just told you as part of my analysis.
Sir, fact of the matter is that even though investigations into the Red Fort car blast are ongoing, there is enough evidence to suggest that there are strong linkages to Pakistan-based Jaish-e-Mohammed. The question really is, has Pakistan learned absolutely no lessons from Operation Sindoor? What's your take on that?
See, Neha, of course it has learnt its lessons from Operation Sindoor, but no nation which gets involved in this kind of an activity wants to admit failure. Admitting failure is a political harakiri virtually against its own population, for its own population. So they will always adopt a posture of bravado. That is exactly what we are witnessing at the moment. What is also there is that we are up against an adversary who may not be very efficient on the battlefield, who is not very efficient in the conduct of such operations, proxy operations, but is extremely resourceful in narrative management. And this is exactly what he's doing. He's confusing the world by a statement one day claiming a claim by terrorists, another day a claim by a political establishment, and that too a comparatively low profile political personality making this particular claim. This helps assist the Pakistani state to make the color of the environment even more gray than it is. Gray zone is exactly what Pakistan thrives in. Black and white are not the colors which suit Pakistan as far as the strategy is concerned.
So, what we need to then ask is what really do you believe are India's options as far as dealing with Pakistan and its export of terrorism is concerned in the aftermath of the Red Fort car blast? Now, after Operation Sindoor, India had made it abundantly clear that we had a new doctrine on fighting terror, that no distinction would be made any longer between state and non state actors, and any terror attack perpetrated on Indian soil would be considered an act of war. How do you look at that, sir?
Very good. That's an excellent question. The way I look at it, first of all, 6 months have passed almost since the time Operation Sundur took place. When you make statements at a particular time, it is for that moment, for the current, in the context of the times at that time. Not to say that India's doctrine, declared doctrine at that time, has changed overnight. No, nothing of the sort. What India will do is something which will be to its strategic advantage. I know that everyone in the street, perhaps a lot of media people, etc., are all looking for words to say India will strike back. It sounds very romantic. You know, Operation Sindoor 2.0 being spoken about and things like that. Well, India will do it. If it's required, it will definitely do it and do it very, very effectively. The armed forces are completely prepared for it. But the decision will be taken when it is perceived that the outcome will be completely in our favor. At the moment, I think the manner in which India needs to respond is on the narrative side, the non military side. That in today's modern warfare, everything is not kinetic. A lot has to do with media, social media, narratives, perception management, psychological warfare, etc. Most people don't understand this. In modern warfare, hybrid is the color which is there. What we have been weak at in India is the color hybrid. What we need to do is to go back now and more robustly contest and tell the world, push back onto the world and tell them, see, you've got a nation which is claiming politically, a leadership is claiming politically that it is sponsoring and executing terror on the territory of its neighbor. How would you support this? The unfortunate thing is that most of the world is only interested in its own interests. If its interests are not affected, if the same thing happens globally, like 9/11, when it happened in America, you found the effect of that coming in Afghanistan. That will not happen in this case. So you have to be ensured that you go out and tell people. I think the example of our seven parliamentary delegations was a good example, but I'm not even recommending that you have to send out parliamentary delegations. There are lots and lots of ways by people in the strategic world, the people in the media world know how a narrative has to be peddled if it has to be believable and credible to the world. Let's do it. Let's not allow the Shimla agreement to hold us back. A lot of us perceive that the Shimla agreement to which we adhere religiously, we are the ones who honor it by saying that everything is bilateral. Remember, the bilateral part applies to territory, it applies to Kashmir. It does not apply to terrorism, it does not apply to proxy war. Therefore, internationalizing Pakistan's activities worldwide, it does not go against the spirit of the Shimla agreement at all.
So let me ask you this question. There is the issue of the narrative, which is very important in today's warfare. And then there is the geopolitical reality that you alluded to some time back. Now, we've seen in recent months, especially in the aftermath of the Pahalgam terror attack and Operation Sindoor, how US President Donald Trump has gone out of his way to woo Asim Munir and Pakistan. We've also seen how Asim Munir is arrogating to himself more and more powers, making him, if not the most, definitely one of the most powerful army chiefs ever in Pakistan's history. In fact, the recent constitutional amendments have been described by many as a quiet coup in Pakistan. Do you believe that Donald Trump and America's stance towards Pakistan and Asim Munir in particular have perhaps contributed towards emboldening the Pakistan army chief and these elements in that country? And does that, in a sense, complicate matters for India, which continues to fight terrorism?
I endorse your observation completely. There is no doubt about it. The last 6 months of the geopolitical progression of events has definitely emboldened Pakistan, Pakistan's leadership, its quasi leadership, and its main leadership. What we are therefore seeing at the moment are experiments happening. These are things which Pakistan is experimenting with to see the limits of India's tolerance, till where can it go. Pinpricks here and there to keep the issue of Kashmir alive. Of course, now it transcended beyond Kashmir and come into Delhi. This is a very, very bold maneuver, which is something which is going to change things quite dramatically. I can imagine if 32 car bombs had gone off in Delhi, what would have been the state of India-Pakistan relations today? We are told that almost that many number of vehicles were perhaps being prepared for carrying out actions as car bombs. So obviously, Pakistan is bold, getting bolder and bolder and bolder. It seems that militarily it feels and perceives, perhaps it's taking home some wrong lessons from Sindoor and prior to that, to think that it is not defeatable. A stage will come perhaps if this kind of a narrative is played out by Pakistan. I don't foresee anything else than a kinetic exchange. And that may be very, very negative for Pakistan.
And of course, whatever India does will be at a time and place of its choosing. But let me ask you this question, sir. Like you said, this time terror struck the heart of India's capital. It's not just Jammu and Kashmir that we're talking about any longer. There are intelligence inputs to suggest that Jaish-e-Mohammed and other terror groups are actually regrouping, recruiting, and busy raising funds, possibly for a new wave of attacks, not just in Jammu and Kashmir, but in fact across India. How worrying do you think this development is for India's security forces? Of course, this car blast has rocked the entire nation because, what was also recovered in the run up to this attack was 3,000 kilos of explosives. And if you think of the scale on which they were probably planning to mount a terror attack, you would think it could have been New Delhi's 26/11 moment. Thank God our security forces were able to avert it. But how challenging do you believe the situation is?
That's exactly what I was alluding to when I spoke about the 32 potential car blasts which could have happened, car bombs which could have gone off. But having said that, there's no doubt that the Indian intelligence agencies, India's anti-terror security forces have kept India safe for the last 15 years or more, except that they have isolated the whole issue of terror, incubated it inside Jammu and Kashmir. This is the first time you're seeing the breakout from Jammu and Kashmir and coming into the heart of Delhi, the heart of India. That is worrisome. Uh, till now, what we experienced was that every time a thing like this happened, Pakistan attempted to obfuscate whose responsibility it was. This is the first time they're finding an indication of an ownership at the political level. Perhaps that is why I alluded to this fact that it seems to be an experimentation in perception management to see what will India's responses be. I think India needs to take this very seriously. We need to go out to the world and tell the world, and we need to send a very strong message back to Pakistan. Obviously, Pakistan will send an equally strong message back to you verbally to say we are ready for you and we will take you on and things like that. But that's not the end of it. We must convince the world. The world also holds a degree of responsibility for everything which is happening. This emboldening of the Pakistani leadership is largely based upon the kind of geopolitics which have gone on for the better part of the last 6 to 8 months, in fact, almost a year now. So that is the manner in which India has to go about a combination. It must continue to prepare itself, just like the Chief of the Army Staff just said the other day about Operation Sindoor 2.0 and the potential that India has, the fact that we have refurbished all the ammunition, the specialist ammunition, etc. This must continue to be spoken, and our preparedness must not be seen to be withdrawn at all. But at the same time, I think diplomacy has a major role here. Diplomacy, along with projection, the psychological projection to the world, that you are stepping into, the world is stepping into some very dangerous territory if it does not stop nonsense which is coming from the other side of the border from Pakistan.
Most certainly, this is a war that has to be fought on multiple fronts. But let me ask you this: we talked about how the scale of these planned attacks was absolutely mind-boggling. The fact that they were preparing 32 cars, 3,000 kilos of ammunition was recovered. They probably were planning serial blasts in Delhi on the 6th of December. That's what a lot of preliminary investigations seem to suggest. But the fact that you actually saw a suicide attack taking place in India's capital, that is unprecedented. What does this tell us about the changing face of terror? And really, how worrying is this development?
Yes, in fact, this is a worrying thing. There's no doubt about it, because I myself have experienced terror for the better part of the last 30 years. I've seen it, 35 years in Jammu and Kashmir. We had a total of five suicide attacks, and I don't remember the last time we had a suicide attack by a Kashmiri citizen. Pulwama was one, and perhaps one or maybe two earlier than that. Largely, Kashmiris are who became terrorists were up as Fidain, attempting to fight against you. They could be suicide terrorists, not suicide bombers. What Dr. Omar became ultimately, and he seems to be confirmed today, was that he was a suicide bomber. Now, that requires a different kind of a motivation, a different kind of a radicalization completely. And that indicates that there are people, this may be the tip of the iceberg, there are enough people in India's urban areas who are perhaps willing to do this and do it for a cause, an ideological cause in which they believe. When you are up against that kind of a situation, it's a major challenge. It's a major challenge, there's no doubt. You can identify one, two, three, four, or five, but the sixth one will get through and will cause that mayhem, which is what the intention always is. And that will upset the entire apple cart of stability in terms of relationships in this part of the region are concerned.
Absolutely. And therefore, how worrying is the issue of radicalization for India, sir, as we deal with the aftermath of this terror attack? Of course, this is a problem that has existed for a long time now in Kashmir. But as I said, we seem to be looking at a new face of terror today.
Now, radicalization is not limited to Kashmir. Radicalization has always been there as a problem, a challenge in many parts of India, but it has not manifested itself into becoming terror modules. I remind you that
And doctors in
we
this case, I think that's another factor that has
absolutely.
really left people stunned.
So, on the issue of radicalization, I again say this, that radicalization is not limited to Kashmir. It has been there in the much of India, rest of India, across the length and breadth of India, not in great numbers, but it has been there in various walled city areas or various Mofussil towns, etc. The important thing for us to remember is that we did not, Indian Muslims did not provide any any warriors or terrorists or whatever you want to call them for the Al Qaeda ever. But for ISIS, some people did go. None of them were frontline terrorists or frontline warriors for ISIS. They were mostly logisticians. Today, we are seeing a worrying trend. Suddenly, someone prepared to come up and fight the nation by giving his own life for it, for giving his life in this manner. This is a dangerous trend. Counter radicalization and de radicalization is not an easy measure. It needs very deep study. It needs organizations by themselves. It needs partnerships with people. We need to have countries in consultation who have done it successfully. A lot of countries have done it. Indonesia, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Singapore have done it quite successfully. We need to learn their lessons, and we need to quickly set about this task before it becomes too dangerous.
Absolutely. And we saw that video of the Delhi bomber, Dr. Omar, where he seemed to be glorifying suicide attacks as martyrdom. So those are big challenges that India faces today. Final question, sir, before we let you go. I think it would be correct to say that India security forces have done a terrific job, really, by possibly averting a very big attack in India's capital. But what do you think are the lessons from, the unearthing of the Faridabad module and the doctor's module and the Delhi card blast for our security forces? What are the key lessons there?
Well, I think one of the major lessons is intelligence is good. Our intelligence has been good. We need to make it even better. It needs to continue progressing on the path of improvement. And that improvement has to come not through any other route, but through the technological route. So, the use of artificial intelligence, digitization to a great extent, digitization of records, keeping data management completely, all this has to go into a part of the whole business of intelligence. The second thing is, to my mind, prevention, one of the very important things is awareness. When you don't have these kind of incidents happening for 15 years, you have seen a generation of young people grow up in a safe, sound, stable India. This is what we always want India to be. But when one or two or three incidents of this kind take place, it creates a tremendous psychological effect. We want our young people to be aware of this kind of a thing, of what the adversary wants from us. And therefore, a degree of, should I say, citizen based intelligence is very important. That should not lead to witch hunting of people. What it should lead to is awareness among people and discreet reporting at the right times, at the appropriate times, to make sure time. Similarly, lots and lots of things we have learned from Kashmir itself, from the terror campaign which has happened in Kashmir for so many years. Overground workers, the circuits and overground workers, you have to neutralize most of these networks if you want to get rid of terrorists riding on the networks. Financial conduits, drug and narcotics, these are the kind of things which have all got to come under effective control to make sure that the terrorist networks do not get fed with all that they require to carry out their acts.
Well, certainly a lot of valuable lessons there. And as always, very valuable getting your perspectives, Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain. Thank you so much for joining me on Global Pulse.
Thank you very much, Neha. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.